Okay, so today we are going to talk about Block 8 for our sampler bouquet quilts by Hoop Sisters. So as you guys know, you have two options of layout. You have an on-point layout and you have a four-patch layout, and you also have the option to do both, whatever you're feeling. So this is block 8, super cute. It's probably my favorite block so far. It's just very sweet. I love the hearts. I love this detailing in the stem. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk about it. So we're making block 8 today, and we're going to look at a few things on our instructions before we start talking about what we need. So of course you're going to need to decide what sizes you're doing, so 5 or 8. And if you're doing the on-point block, you're going to make 1. If you're doing the 4-patch, you're going to make 4. And if you are doing both, of course, you'll make 5. So let's flip this on over and let's start looking at the layout and our supplies. So we're going to need 3 fabrics for this one. We're going to need fabric 1, which is of course our background that goes here and here. We're going to need fabric 2, which is the green for the leaves of our flower, which are going to go here and here. And we're going to need fabric 3, which is kind of for our flower hearts. So depending on what size you're doing, this is going to dictate how many pieces you need and what inch sizes you're going to need based off the size. So if we are doing the 1 block for the on-point layout, we're going to need to get either 1 piece of 6 by 6 of our background, and we're going to need 1 piece of 2.5 by 11 if we're doing the 5-inch. If we're doing the 8-inch block, we're going to need a 9 by 9 square and a 3.5 by 17-inch piece. Then fabric 2, which is our green, you're going to need to pick those accordingly as well to the inch size, 1.25 inches, 1 3/4. I just cut them 2 inches, that's me, but you'll need one 10 inches long if you're doing the 5 and 15.5 if you're doing the 8. Now for fabric 3, if you're doing the 5-inch, you're going to need 1 piece of 3-inch by 5.5. If you're doing the 8-inch, you're going to need 1 piece 4.5 by 8.25. So I'd probably cut those 5 by 8.5 if that's just me. Now I will tell you, it is kind of a tight fit for the big square that's like 9 inches. So I'd probably go ahead and cut that 9.5. I'd cut that a little bit larger. That's just me. So if you're going to do more than that, you're going to want to go ahead and quadruple that. If you are doing the 4-patch, those are going to be on the instructions on the opposite side. So let's talk about what we've got here. So I've got my piece of fabric 3, which I'm using as the red for my hearts. I've got my piece of green, which is my nice long strip for my leaves. And then I've got fabric 1 here, which is my background. Also, if you are doing the battleizer instead of the no-show mesh like I'm doing, but if you're doing the battleizer like the original pattern manufacturer, which is Hoop Sisters recommends, you're going to need 1 piece of optional wool, and you're going to cut that to about either 8 by 8 or 5 by 5, depending on what size you're doing. Now, I am doing it with an additional piece of batting, so I just cut mine 8 inches big. And I have a piece of no-show mesh stabilizer in my hoop. If you're doing the optional wool, of course, you'll do it this size. And then we're going to need some threads. Oh, and if you are doing the optional back, you will cut that 8 by 8 as well. I'm sorry, 9 by 9. You're going to cut that 9 by 9 as well if you're doing the optional back out of whatever material you're using for that. So this one's only going to take 3 colors. I'm using my quilting, and my flip and fold fabric color is ES 165, which is my cream. For my green, I have chosen ES 951, and for the red, for my little hearts, I have chosen red color number ES 266. So always, you're going to need a nice pair of scissors to trim with, and you are going to need some embroidery tape. No matter what you're doing, I recommend that. And if you were doing the battleizer and the optional Vanish Light thread or water-soluble thread of your choosing, you're going to want to have that on hand as well. Just know if I say Vanish Light, I am deferring to any type of water-soluble thread, no matter the brand. Vanish Light is just what I have always used. So bear with me. I'm going to pivot right over to the screen over here. So I've got my design loaded up and ready to go. I have my exquisite thread color number ES 165 in my needle, and I have regular embroidery bobbin in my bobbin. No matter what you're doing, battleizer, stabilizer, optional wool, whatever, you're going to start with regular embroidery bobbin in your bobbin area. If you are doing the optional water-soluble thread, you're going to want to have that through your needle right now. But no matter what, we're going to go ahead and stitch machine stitch step 1 directly onto whatever we have hooped, whether that be stabilizer or our battleizer, whatever you have chosen. We're going to stitch that down. Just to make a note, I do have a 9014 embroidery needle in my needle at the moment. Now, if you were doing the optional wool, you were going to sew machine stitch step 2, again with the water soluble thread in your needle, regular embroidery bobbin thread in your bobbin. Now, if you're doing like me, I am skipping over machine stitch step 2 and I am repeating machine stitch step 1 just to tack my batting down because it does a heavier zigzag stitch, which you would want if you're doing like battleizer and wool because that's 2 layers of batting. You need kind of a coarser stitch to hold that down, but I just prefer to do the straight stitch. You may have seen me do videos where I've done the zigzag. That's mostly just to show what it looks like. Alrighty, so now that we've got that tacked down, if you have done the optional wool or if you have done the batting like I have, you're going to want to go ahead and trim close. Also, if you repeated, make sure, like I did, you're going to go ahead and skip machine stitch step 2 and go straight to machine stitch step 3. That is going to kind of stitch a general outline onto the batting. So let's go ahead and trim this away just a smidge. All right, so we got that trimmed. We're going to go ahead and hoop that back up. And we're going to sew machine stitch step 3 directly onto our batting. Now, if you were using the optional Vanish light thread, you're going to want to go ahead and change that to a neutral color before you step out machine stitch step 3. Again, no matter what, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, you're going to have regular embroidery bobbin thread in right now. Excuse me. So the first thing we're going to want to work with is our big square of 9" by 9" background fabric. So it is going to stitch it down right through here. So make sure that your fabric is superseding all the edges. Make sure it's on the corners. I kind of just laid it to where it was flush at this bottom corner over here on this side, just kind of getting a little overhang everywhere because I do want to be able to trim this down at the end. So be careful. Just kind of let it hover around your batting if you did the optional batting like I did, or if you use the optional wool. If you're using the battleizer, just make sure you're superseding beyond the stitch line with this 9" square. Again, it's a tight fit, so if I had to do this over, I'd have probably cut it a ½ inch bigger. So we're going to go ahead and let that get tacked down. And again, if you're not using a batik like me, you're going to want to make sure that that is face side up. Great. So now that we have our initial outline stitched down, it's going to go ahead and move up here and it's going to stitch down the outline for the hearts. Perfect. So now we are going to trim a 1/4 inch away just on the 2 inside lines. So we're going to trim here at the bottom about a 1/4 inch away. And then we're going to come up the side and trim about 1/4 of an inch away. Now we're going to go ahead and switch our threads. So I'm going to switch from ES 165 and I'm going to move over to ES 266, which was my bright red. And you're going to want to go ahead and have whatever you have selected to be your fabric number 3 on hand. And you are going to want to make sure that it completely covers all of the stitches where the hearts are. So cover all the heart area and go ahead and sew that down. So this is going to tack it down with a pretty heavy stitch, so it's going to hold all of that down well, and then it is going to stop to allow you to trim. Now, this block is very easy. It goes very quickly, but it does take a little time to stitch the hearts out. That is the most stitch intensive. So if you don't have a couple of bobbins wound, I am going through about a full bobbin every 2 blocks, just because there's about 13,000, it says there's 13,529 stitches. That's quite a bit of stitching for a block. So I'm going through a bobbin about every 2 to 2.5 blocks. So have a couple of bobbins wound and ready to go for this one of your embroidery thread, because that is what you're going to primarily be using. Of course, if you are changing threads as you go to quilt it at the very end, you're going to want to have a bobbin wound of your background color that you're quilting with, if you're doing it all in the same. If you're wanting to match the colors, so I'm going to be, if you're doing that with optional back and you want to match the colors, so it's going to do like the cream color quilting with the feathers, so you're going to want to have one in that color. And if you're matching as you go, then you're also going to need one in your green, so it does a beautiful decorative stitch with that. So you'll want to have one of each of those wound as well if you are doing the color changes for the back. So let's trim this down real quick. So because this is just a regular applique and not our flip and fold, we don't have to worry about trying to be at 1/4 of an inch. We're just going to cut as close to the stitch line as humanly possible. And if you don't get it super close every time, just like I said before, just go back and redefine those edges and get it as close as you can to the stitches without cutting into the stitches. It does do a nice wide satin stitch. It does, like the previous block did, it does a nice heavy all over satin stitch where it does both an underlay and a good run stitch on either side. So it holds all that edge fabric down super well before it does any of the satin stitching. Now this next step is going to be a bit time consuming. Not this very next one, the one after it is going to be a bit time consuming. It's going to be your most stitch intensive part. It's a 7-minute stitch out on my machine, so I don't know how long it'll be for you, but just know it is the longest step altogether. Okay, moving on up. There we go. And she's trimmed. All right, once you've got her trimmed, go ahead and load your hoop back into your machine. And you are going to stitch out machine stitch step 5, which just does a cute little zigzag decorative stitch through the hearts. Okay, great. So whatever color you chose for that, awesome. I just kept the same color in. Now I'm going to go ahead and sew it in the same color. You can choose to change that if you want it to complement or contrast, but we're going to go ahead and sew machine stitch step 7. Again, this is a rather lengthy process, and all it is doing this very nice, very heavy satin stitch all the way around. So it's going to outline it, and then it's going to come in and it's going to do an inside, and it's just going to do a really heavy, nice, thick satin stitch. Now this step is very time consuming because, like I said, it's going to take 7 minutes just for this to stitch out, and I don't want to bore you guys with it, so I'm not really going to say much else just because this step is taking a while. So if you want to fast forward a few minutes, I will not complain one little bit, but I stitch these in real time and I go through the whole process, so I don't ever fast forward or anything to that effect. But this one is going to take a while, so if you want to go ahead and fast forward, now's the time to do it because all we're doing is the satin stitching. Okay, so we have finished our decorative stitch around our hearts. So now let's finish up our flip and folds. So we're gonna want to go ahead and cut our threads, and we're gonna want to switch over back to our ES 165. So switching over to that real quick. And we're going to want to go ahead and grab our fabric number 2, which is our long green strip. It's going to go ahead and it's going to start here on the left side. So you're going to want to put that flush even with the raw edge of your previous background fabric that was stitched out. And you're going to go ahead and sew machine stitch step 8, which is going to tack it down. Now we're going to go ahead and flip it over, smooth it down with a good finger press or using a rolling press, and go ahead and sew machine stitch step 9, which is just going to tack that down and give you your trim line. Alrighty, so we've got that side done. Now let's go ahead and repeat on the other side. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take another side of it, what we've cut off, where we've allowed our 1/4 inch seam line, and we are going to go ahead and sew down machine stitch step 10, which is just going to tack that down for us. We're going to flip it down and smooth it, and we're going to tack it down. This is machine stitch step 11 that we're currently on. Perfect. I'm going to pull that a little closer to me just so I can trim it well. And again, you're going to leave about a 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides, and you're going to trim away. Okay? Flipping and dipping. Alrighty. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab my remaining piece of fabric 1, and we are going to start on the bottom side. So I take this piece and put it even on the far right side, and I'm going to just put it flush with our previous cut line, and we're going to go ahead and sew machine stitch step 12, which is going to tack that down. We're going to flip it over, and then we're just going to trim on this side, which is just going to kind of give us a cut line, and it's going to allow us to use the other side of our strip that we have here. So again, allow yourself about a 1/4 inch. Okay, so let's just trim that away. Okay, and take the remainder of your strip and lay it on the far side. All right, good deal. Go ahead and start stitching that out. This will be machine stitch step 14. That is going to tack that down. Perfect. Now that we've got that tacked down, we're going to flip it over. And this is where we're going to tape if needed. Also, if you were doing like me, you do not change your bobbin, period, point blank. You never see me do it because I'm not doing it. But if you are doing the optional backing, you're going to want to go ahead and change your bobbin soon. Right now, we're going to put in the Vanish Light if you are working with the Vanish Light, and you're going to want to put that in your needle, but you can go ahead and leave your embroidery bobbin in right now because we are ready to flip the hoop over and put our back on. We are at that step. So machine stitch step 15 is going to hold down all of our edges and tack our back down if we're doing the optional back. And if you were doing the optional Vanish Light, you want to put that in your needle. So just before you start, just know what you need to do. And we're going to go ahead and stitch down machine stitch step 15, which again is just going to tack everything down and attach our back if we are using the optional back. Went a little high on the tape. Move it down. There we go. Perfect. So now that we've done step 15, we're going to go ahead and change our threads to whatever color you've chosen for your green, which is going to do that really pretty decorative stitch in the stem, and it is going to also kind of like give us our little trindles around our hearts, and it's also going to stitch out like a bean stitch in our leaves. Now, if you were doing the additional optional back, if you were changing it to where you want it to all be the same color, go ahead and put that bobbin in. If you are, if you are doing like me, leave your bobbin alone. If you are wanting your thread color to match your back and your top at the same time, you're going to want to go ahead and wind a bobbin and put that in your bobbin area now out of this color. So I'm using ES 951 as my green, and we're going to go ahead and let that stitch out right now. It does beautiful detail work, and it's going to be about 4 minutes, so I'm going to let that stitch. Okay, girls, so we have our, oh gosh, can't get the words out of my mouth. We have our green done, so we've done all the beautiful detail stitching. So let's go ahead and switch again. So for those of you like me who are doing the back that you were adding all at the very butt end of this, go ahead and just switch your top thread. I am switching back to ES 165, which is my cream. For those of you that are doing the additional optional back, go ahead and just make sure you have the bobbin in the color that you want to either match your back or match your top thread. So you will need to go ahead and change that bobbin if you're changing it at all. So let's go ahead and thread that needle, and let's let that quilting get started. And this will be your very last step, machine stitch step 17. I didn't want to talk a ton because if you guys wanted to fast forward, I didn't want to put a ton of details in there. But now that we're getting to the end, I know you guys probably noticed it does some like bigger feathers here on the two sides, so those go pretty quick. Then it does up back to the micro feathering here in this side of the block. And I know you guys are going to just adore that beautiful stitch it does for your stem. It's almost bow tie shaped, but that leaf detailing is just straight up gorgeous. I love that. So this one is a very easy block. It's really, really easy to stitch. It's just a little time consuming because of all the heavy stitching. So just be a little patient with it. Now, just to mention it, so just to keep time short on the video, when all is said and done, when you are finished, this is your last step. So you're going to have, this is step 17 of 17. You're going to want to go ahead and just trim it down to either half or a quarter. Quarter is what the pattern manufacturer recommends. I like to do a half just because, like I said, I think it's easier to press my seams open. Just keep it as consistent as possible. So if you pick one, just keep it that way. Neither is wrong. But this by far has been my favorite block thus far. And I also think block 12 is really cute. So that's going to be a great way to finish up the quilt. So I'm really looking forward to that one as well. I know we've got a few more blocks to go. This will again be block number 8 of our sampler bouquet. Now you'll also notice that it's going to run through the quilting in here just a little bit through the decorative stitch, but not like bad where it's going to be like super noticeable. All right, fantastic. So you have done all 17 steps. You're ready to take it out of the hoop and go trim it accordingly. Girls, that was block number 8. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you might have gotten a little inspired, and we'll see you back for block 9. See you guys. Bye-bye.